Jamunatiravanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallava Giri Varadhari Gopi Jana Vallava Giri Varadhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamunatiravanachari Jamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraja Acharya Stotra Sata Shishimati Stivanga Sesi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Prem Se Kaho Se Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Sri Vrindavan Mayapur Dhama Ki Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki Ganga Jamuna Maya Ki Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to Srila Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So actually Daksha Prabhu has asked me, because I think yesterday we read text 41 with a long purport, so today we do text 42 and 43, which is also a very long purport, and then next time they do text 44. Yeah. So I just read, and then we can do the word by word. Tandra Bratus Putra Nam Sri Jiva Gushani Yata Bhakti Granta Koil Tara Antanai. Please repeat. Tandra, his, Bratu Putra, nephew. Nama of the name. Sri Jiva Goswami, Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhupada. Yatha, all Bhakti Grantha, books on devotional service. Kaila, compiled. Tara, that. Anta, end. Nai, there is not. Translation: Sri Rupa Goswami's nephew, Srila Jiva Goswami, has compiled so many books on devotional service that there is no counting them. Text 43. Shri Bhagavat Sandarbha Nam Grantha Vistar Bhakti Siddhantera Tate Dekhai Yakchena Par. In Sri Bhagavat Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami has written conclusively about the ultimate end of devotional service. Please repeat the two texts. Sri Rupa Goswami's nephew, Srila Jiva Goswami, has compiled so many books on devotional service that there is no counting them. In Sri Bhagavat Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami has written conclusively about the ultimate end of devotional service. Okay, so this is a little bit of a purport, but nevertheless very interesting. Purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Bhagavat Sandarbha is also known as Sat Sandarbha. In the first part, called Tattva Sandarbha, it is proved that Srimad Bhagavatam is the most authoritative evidence directly pointing to the absolute truth. The second Sandarbha, called Bhagavat Sandarbha, draws a distinction between impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma, and describes the spiritual world and the domination of the mode of goodness, devoid of contamination, by the other two material modes. In other words, there is a vivid description of the transcendental position known as Shuddha Sattva. Material goodness is apt to be contaminated by the other two material qualities, ignorance and passion. But when one is situated in the Shuddha Sattva position, there is no chance for such contamination. It is a spiritual platform of pure goodness. The potency of the Supreme Lord and the living entity is also described, and there is a description of the inconceivable energies and varieties of energies of the Lord. The potencies are divided into categories: internal, external, personal, marginal, and so forth. There are also discussions of the eternality of deity worship, the omnipotence of the deity, his all-pervasiveness, his giving shelter to everyone, his subtle and gross potencies, his personal manifestations, his expressions of form, quality, and pastimes, his transcendental position, and his complete form. It is also stated that everything pertaining to the Absolute has the same potency, and that the spiritual world, the associates in the spiritual world, and the threefold energies of the Lord in the spiritual world are all transcendental. There are further discussions concerning the difference between the impersonal Brahman and the personality of Godhead, the fullness of the personality of Godhead, the objective of all Vedic knowledge, the personal potencies of the Lord, and the personality of Godhead as the original author of Vedic knowledge. The third Sandarbha is called Paramatma Sandarbha. And in this book, there is a description of Paramatma, the Supersoul, and an explanation of how the Supersoul exists in millions and millions of living entities. There are discussions of the difference between the qualitative incarnations and discourses concerning the living entities, Maya, the material world, the theory of transformation, the illusory energy, the sameness of this world and the Supersoul, and the truth about this material world. In this connection, the opinions of Sridhar Swami are given. It is stated that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although devoid of material qualities, superintends all material activities. There is also a discussion of how the Lila Avatar incarnations respond to the desires of the devotees, and how the Supreme Personality of Godhead is characterized by 6 opulences. The fourth Sandarbha is called the Krishna Sandarbha, and in this book, Krishna is proved to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are discussions of Krishna's pastimes and qualities, his superintendence of the Purush avatars, and so forth. The opinions of Sridhar Swami are corroborated. In each and every scripture, the supremacy of Krishna is stressed. Baladev, Sankarshan, and other expansions of Krishna are emanations of Mahasankarshan. All the incarnations and expansions exist simultaneously in the body of Krishna, who is described as two-handed. There are also descriptions of the Goloka planet, Vrindavan, the eternal place of Krishna. The identity of Goloka and Vrindavan, the Yadavas and the Kaur boys, both eternal associates of Krishna. The adjustment and equality of the manifest and unmanifest pastimes. Sri Krishna's manifestation in Gokul, the queens of Dwaraka as expansions of the internal potency, and, superior to them, the super excellent gopis. There is also a list of the gopis' names and a discussion of the topmost position of Srimati Radharani. Hare Krishna. The fifth Sandarbha is called Bhakti Sandarbha. And in this book, there is a discussion of how devotional service can be directly executed and how such service can be adjusted, either directly or indirectly. There is a discussion of the knowledge of all kinds of scripture, the establishment of the Vedic institution of Varna Ashram, bhakti as superior to fruitive activity, and so forth. It is also stated that without devotional service, even a brahmana is condemned. There are discussions of the process of karma tyag, the giving of the results of karma to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the practices of mystic yoga and philosophical speculation, which are deprecated as simply hard labor. Is that properly pronounced? Deprecated? Yeah. Worship of the demigods is discouraged, and worship of a Vaishnava is considered exalted. No respect is given to the non-devotees. There are discussions of how one can be liberated even in this life, Jivan Mukta. Lord Shiva as a devotee, and how a bhakta and his devotional service are eternally existing. It is stated that through bhakti, one can attain all success. For bhakti is transcendental to the material qualities. There is a discussion of how the self is manifest through bhakti. There is also a discussion of the self's bliss, as well as how bhakti, even imperfectly executed, enables one to attain the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unmotivated devotional service is highly praised, and an explanation is given of how each devotee can achieve the platform of unmotivated service by association with other devotees. There is a discussion of the differences between the Mahabhagavat and the ordinary devotee, the symptoms of philosophical speculation, the symptoms of self-worship or ahangrahopasana, the symptoms of devotional service, the symptoms of imaginary perfection, the acceptance of regulative principles, service to the spiritual master, the Mahabhagavat, liberated devotee, and service to him, service to Vaishnavas in general, the principles of hearing, chanting, remembering, and service the lotus feet of the Lord, offenses in worship, offensive effects, prayers, engaging oneself as an eternal servant of the Lord, making friendships with the Lord, and surrendering everything for his pleasure. There's also a discussion of Raganuga Bhakti, spontaneous love of Godhead, of the specific purpose of becoming a devotee of Lord Krishna, and a comparative study of other perfectional stages. The sixth Sandarbha is called Priti Sandarbha, a thesis on love of Godhead. Here it is stated that through love of Godhead one becomes perfectly liberated and attains the highest goal of life. A distinction is made between the liberated condition of a personalist and that of an impersonalist, and there is a discussion of liberation during one's lifetime as distinguished from liberation from material bondage. Of all kinds of liberation, liberation in loving service to the Lord is described as the most exalted. And meeting the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face is shown to be the highest perfection of life. Immediate liberation is contrasted with liberation by a gradual process. Both realization of Brahman and meeting with the Supreme Personality of Godhead are described as liberation within one's lifetime. But meeting with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, both internally and externally, is shown to be super excellent, above the transcendental realization of the Brahman effulgence. There is a comparative study of liberation as Salokya, Samipya, and Sarupya. Samipya is better than Salokya. Devotional service is considered to be liberation with greater facilities, and there is a discussion of how to obtain it. There are also discussions of the transcendental state one achieves after attaining the devotional platform, which is the exact position of love of Godhead. The marginal symptoms of transcendental love and how it is awakened. the distinction between so-called love and transcendental love on the platform of love of Godhead, and different types of humors and mellows enjoyed in relishing the lusty affairs of the gopis, which are different from mundane affairs, which in turn are symbolical representations of pure love for Krishna. There are also discussions of bhakti mixed with philosophical speculation, the super excellence of the love of the gopis, the difference between opulent devotional service and loving devotional service, the exalted position of the residents of Gokul, the progressively exalted position of the friends of Krishna, the Gopas and the Gopis in parental love with Krishna, and finally the super excellence of the love of the Gopis and that of Srimati Radharani. There is also a discussion of how spiritual feelings can be present when one simply imitates them, and of how such mellows are far superior to the ordinary mellows of mundane love. And there are descriptions of different ecstasies: the awakening of ecstasy, transcendental qualities, the distinction of Dhirodhata, the utmost attractiveness of conjugal love, the ecstatic features, the permanent ecstatic features, the mellows divided in 5 transcendental features of direct loving service, and indirect loving service considered in 7 divisions. Finally, there is a discussion of overlapping of different rasas, and there are discussions of shanta, neutrality, servitorship, taking shelter, parental love, conjugal love, direct transcendental enjoyment, and enjoyment in separation, previous attraction, and the glories of Srimati Radharani. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, Sri Rupa Goswami's nephew, Srila Jiva Goswami, has compiled so many books on devotional service that there is no counting them. In Sri Bhagavat Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami has written conclusively about the ultimate end of devotional service. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah. So, this is the section, first chapter of the Madhya Lila. Adi Lila has been describing all the basics and kind of an introduction to Lord Chaitanya's life as a youth. Now, Madhya Lila is the 6 years where Lord Chaitanya traveled to the south before he came back to Jagannath Puri. And then Jagannath Puri's pastimes are, I understand, the Antya Lila. So here it's like an introduction to the Madhya Lila. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is giving the different books that the followers of Lord Chaitanya have left, which is kind of interesting that he wants to establish that those books are there. And maybe not so much this purport, but former purports, and the next purport as well, 144. It's amazing how Srila Prabhupada gives so much, not detail, but touches on every subject that is actually discussed in those books. And the question is why? why did Srila Prabhupada bother to put these topics into the purport, in his purport. So I understand possibly two reasons. One is to awaken our interest. He wanted us to study those books. Prabhupada mentions actually that we should, once we're of course qualified, study the books of the Goswamis. And the second reason, not 100% sure, but it's kind of my conclusion, but you see through the books, especially Caitanya Caritamrita, written by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, a lot of emphasis in giving assurance so nobody can come in the future and say, well, actually it's like this. Srila Prabhupada gives a lot of, for example, indications where the holy places are of certain saints. And here also he's giving this one by one, because even within the last 500 years since the disappearance of Lord Caitanya in India, so many unscrupulous things have popped up. People declaring this, and this is actually, the book, this is actually happening, and, I did this, and I don't know, whatever. If you go to India, it's very evident that there's a lot of deviations. So Srila Prabhupada wanted, that's what I feel when I read these purports, he wanted to make sure that these books of the Goswamis are kept intact and not abused. So here he's talking about, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is talking about Srila Jiva Goswami. Lord Chaitanya has given only 8 stanzas. Lord Chaitanya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appearing 500 years ago, has only given a very short, you could say, but nevertheless meaningful description of the holy name, how to chant the holy name, what we recite as the ISKCON. And if you chant your rounds and you feel a little bit discouraged, maybe monotonous, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare, same thing all the time. But you don't feel so much enlivened by it, then you should study these 8 stanzas. They give a very smooth or a very beautiful description of what actually the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is and what it actually does, and the mood that we should have by chanting. It starts with glories to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years. So only that. If you just think of that, when you cry out to Radha and Krishna, right? You're crying out, Hare Krishna. Oh, Radha and Krishna, you are so great. Glories to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, to the names of Radha and Krishna. Oh, cleans the dust accumulated for years. But just that, just think of that. When you cry out, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. You are so exalted, I'm so fallen. All glories to you, not to me, to you. Glories to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, right? Who cleanses the dust of all the... That's just one of the 6 items that there in the first verse. There's 8 verses. So I'm just giving you the first one, just to start. For myself too, because I'm still the first one. Cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years. Yes. We've accumulated so much dust in our heart. The heart it's like a mirror. If there's a lot of dust, then can't see. So the Hare Krishna mantra clears this dust. And the more you chant, and the more you cry out for Krishna's help, the more the dust goes away and the clearer you can see. And you think, oh my God, what I've been doing all these years. All these lifetimes, millions of lifetimes, oh my God, what I've been doing. Just by that, then maybe the next class I talk a little bit more about it. Now I wanted actually to keep going. There's an unlimited interest in this purport, is an unlimited amount of topics that we could discuss. But the author, the Srila Jiva Goswami, he was the nephew of Rupa and Sanatan. They were direct disciples of Lord Caitanya. Lord Caitanya appeared in Bengal in India, 1486, I think, right? Christian calendar. So that's 5 years before Columbus went to America, right? And while he was conquering all of India, inundating with the holy names over the next 40, 80 years, in Europe, all these conquistadors were running all over the place and declaring America the earth of, this king and that king. And Magallanes was trying to go around Africa to India to establish a commercial route. So while in Europe you could say, this expansion is going on, materialistic expansion of conquering the world, in India, Lord Chaitanya was spreading the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and starting a spiritual revolution at the same time. And he had many disciples. Most exalted amongst them were these two ministers. They weren't just ordinary people. They were actually, imagine, the minister of, or the treasurer and the minister of, prime minister actually. They became devotees of Lord Chaitanya. They were attracted to his teachings. They were captivated by this revolution, this knowledge, revolutionary knowledge. So Lord Chaitanya instructed them personally, and then one of their brothers, his son, is Jiva Goswami. And Lord Chaitanya sent Rupa and Sanatan to Vrindavan, which is the place where Lord Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago, to unearth the places where Krishna had manifested his pastimes on the earth 5,000 years ago. He appeared personally on the earth. That is a very outstanding, amazing aspect of our philosophy. You won't find that in any other, unless maybe it's in India, but in any other philosophy in the world, that God as a person enters his own material creation, where the living entities live who are rebellious, who don't want to accept his authority. So this is the material world, it's like a prison house, and God enters there without becoming contaminated by the same mentality, keeping himself always pure, having a body of his body is not material as our body when he appears in this material manifestation, in different incarnations, different forms. His body is made of eternity, full knowledge, and full bliss. It appears like an ordinary human being. People who are not devotees, they wouldn't recognize Krishna, but he actually appears within his own creation. And that is very confusing even to the highest philosophers. How the Supreme is a person. Why? And then why would he appear within his own creation just to animate his devotees? So you wouldn't find that possibly in any other. Most philosophies today in the world is God is not a person, and everything comes out of nothing, and somehow it manifests out of nothing. But we as Vaishnavas, we don't accept that conclusion. How can from nothing variety appear? Doesn't make much sense. It's like you combine darkness and then you produce light. Or you combine ignorance, everything is a fool, everybody's a fool, and then suddenly knowledge comes out. Doesn't make sense. Why do we think like this? Like, you combine these material elements and then suddenly consciousness springs up, which reproduces itself unlimitedly and supposedly evolves into, more and more variety of things. But the origin is nothing. Why do we think like that? This is exactly the reason why we're here in the material world. Because we want to take God out of the equation. And even the biggest philosophies teach that. Take God out of the equation, everything springs up out of nothing. Or maybe it's a light, okay. But why would there suddenly be variety? Conscious variety. And why would God... Yeah. So it keeps going. So this is a lot of information. Shiva Goswami, who was the nephew of these two, Rupa and Sanatan, these ministers who became devotees 500 years ago of Lord Caitanya, 450 years ago. He wrote more than 400,000 verses, Sanskrit verses like the one we read today, 400,000. Now, that's a lot. Just on how to understand more deeply these teachings, right, of Krishna, the Vedic teachings. There's an interesting pastime that I wanted to touch upon. Okay, I have a few more minutes. In India, it's common that, like today we have the boxers because we're not very philosophically inclined, right? They have a fight, and the one who knocks the other out, he's the winner, right? But in India, 500 years ago, it was different. There were two people, and they had a philosophical fight, debate. Then the one who convinces the other, he becomes the master, and the other one surrenders to him, like that. So they had philosophical debate. So this person, because Rupa and Sanatan, these two disciples of Lord Chaitanya, they became very famous. They also wrote books on bhakti, on devotional service, on Krishna, on philosophy. So this person came. He was a so-called learned person. In India, it's common. They call the learned person Digvijay. Digvijay means somebody who defeats everyone in all directions. Right? Yeah. So he was a Digvijay. His name was Rupa Narayan Saraswati. So he came, and he was as puffed up as his so-called learning. He's very puffed up, like learning can do, right? You become very proud. So he went around, traveled around India, defeating in logic and grammar these other learned people or philosophers, and he would demand that when the other person was defeated, that they sign a paper, a Jai Patra, I think, something like that it's called. Signed a paper saying that they had been defeated by him. Right? So he was walking around with all these papers. So he came to North India as well, where Rupa and Sanatan were living. And Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, they were living under, imagine they were ministers of the government. They had literally a palace for themselves. You can still go there. I think you can see the bathing ghat, the area where they used to take bathe, and it's so opulent. I mean, the amount of money they had, you wouldn't be able possibly to compare it to anyone these days. But they were so opulent. When they took the teachings of Lord Caitanya, they became so attracted to write. They would actually live under trees in a place. Vrindavan is actually quite cold, and they would live under a different tree every night, just not to become attached. That's how much they were absorbed. And they would write these scriptures about devotional service, Krishna, our relationship to Krishna, living under a different tree every night for years. After being a minister, you must have a real higher taste to do something like that, isn't it? So they had this higher taste, and they were so absorbed, they didn't want to waste their time with a so-called logician. So he challenged them to a debate. The two brothers, he challenged them, and they were just, no, I'm busy, and like that. They tried to avoid him. But he became very adamant. So he said, so if you're not debating with me, that means you don't have any knowledge, and you sign this paper right now, that I have been defeating you. And they took the paper and signed it, gave it back to him. Yes, you've defeated us. So he went around starting to show that paper to everybody, and people were getting confused. So Shiva Goswami, who was there, their nephew, who was actually the disciple of one of them, Rupa, he became furious, couldn't tolerate it. A Vaishnava, a devotee of the Lord, it's not that for him humility means just to walk away from things. No, actually humility means to stand up for the cause of the Lord, cause of Krishna, and spread the truth, spread his teaching. So it's not that the Vaishnava doesn't become angry when there is foolishness or injustice. It's like when we read Bhagavad Gita, right? We like my mother, she can't accept that Arjuna was a warrior, killing people, and that Krishna was telling him to work in his service, killing people. How is that? How God can do such a thing? How can say such a thing? This is just, But it's like telling a surgeon, don't use the knife to cut the cancer. That is our explanation. Krishna was telling Arjuna to put things straight in the world. The world administration was topsy-turvy. It came to the point where these other group, they wanted war. So Krishna said, go ahead. It's your duty as a king. Violence is not bad in itself. It's the application of violence which can be bad, of course. But there is a proper use of violence. Just like a surgeon has a knife. The same knife in the hand of a criminal causes havoc, but in the hand of a surgeon it can be a decision between life and death. Or a policeman, he has a gun. The same gun in the hand of a crazy guy causes havoc, but in the hand of a policeman who knows how to apply it. Like that. So, it's not that the Vaishnava just looks on when other Vaishnavas are offended, attacked. No, he becomes furious. He applies his anger. So Jiva Goswami became very angry when he heard that this person was going around saying he had defeated. So he accepted the challenge. They sat down for seven days, and Jiva Goswami completely smashed him. It's said that the scholar he left Vrindavan was never heard of again. Never ever in all of India. So he totally defeated him philosophically. But when he went back to his spiritual master Rupa wasn't pleased. He said, you've become proud. The Vaishnava doesn't, just for his, to be superior to somebody else. This person is completely, a waste of time. Why did you do that? Why? At least he was showing he wasn't pleased. Some Vaishnavas say that he actually wanted to show the world that yes, we should not become proud just because he wanted to show the world, give a lesson to his disciple, don't become proud. So he chastised him very severely. He said, a person thinking himself very advanced in logic and argument, he shouldn't be living in Vrindavan. He should live outside Vrindavan. So Jiva Goswami actually left that place and lived in a hollow of a tree for a year without talking to anyone. So when his brother Sanatan found out about it, he approached his brother and he said, why are you not following the teachings of our master, Lord Caitanya? Rupa Goswami said, what do you mean? What do you mean? He said, you study the teachings of our master, and when you find out what you are not following, then I will point it out to you. So Rupa Goswami went through these teachings, and then one of the, I can't remember, is it one of the 6 qualities of a Vaishnava or Shiva Doya? I think it's one of the 26 qualities, isn't it? Yeah. Being kind to every living entity. So, Jiva Doya means that. Jiva means living entity and Doya means to be kind. But Shiva Goswami, so Shiva Doya means also be kind to Shiva Goswami. Right? So when Rupa saw that, he laughed and said, okay, yes, correct. So he called him back after a year or so. So I find that very interesting pastimes of how Vaishnavas deal with each other, respect each other, and love each other in the service of Krishna. And here we got a little bit of a glimpse of how exalted Shiva Goswami became by the blessings of his spiritual masters. And Srila Prabhupada, as a last point, he said, of all the philosophies within this world, the Vedic philosophy is the most broad, the most perfect, and the best. Only the highest scholars, but within the scholars of this Vedic philosophy, Jiva Goswami was the most exalted. That's a very high statement, I would say. But still, to this day, people agree that Jiva Goswami was the most exalted philosopher out of all the Vedic philosophers. So, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Any questions? Yes.
You were saying how, our heart has become hard because of all the layers of contamination we've accumulated. So Rupa Goswami apparently said that we will know our heart is becoming soft when, as soon as we hear just the sound of Hare Krishna, tears just squirt from the eyes. So, as you were saying, we're not at that platform. We're chanting and not all the time feeling it because of our heart has become very hard. And I was reading, Prabhupada said, our heart has to become as soft as a cotton ball.
I think also in one of Rupa Goswami's books that Prabhupada gave us, Nectar of Devotion, can't remember exactly where, but Prabhupada talks about our heart becomes gold, right? Gold, like gold. But the impersonalist's heart, who thinks that God is not a person, and austerity brings me to realization, and it becomes gold, but it becomes very hard, like gold. Even though gold is not the hardest metal, but it becomes very, gold. Whereas the heart of the Vaishnava becomes like golden as well, but like ghee. Very soft. Very soft. So that's the difference. Between the two philosophers, personalists and impersonalists, they don't like each other so much. They don't like each other so much. More you understand the two philosophies and the more you follow the process of Krishna consciousness, you will understand why. For a personalist, to say God can't, it's like you have a son, you love him very much. Of course you love your son. He's a good boy, very intelligent, and then somebody comes and your son doesn't have intelligence. Your son is numb. Your son is blind. Your son is stupid. Your son doesn't have legs, he doesn't have arms, he doesn't have ears, he doesn't have... What would you think? So this philosophy of God is a light who, everything emanates without recognizing the person. Because we are persons. So how can God, who is the origin, not be a person? In other words, how we are conscious. We're not just energy, we're also conscious energy. So how the truth behind the energy that we made of course, and we see, but how the truth behind that cannot be conscious. If we're conscious, like that. So God is a conscious person. Not limited like we do, he's an unlimited conscious person, but to say that he doesn't have, he's just impersonal, it's very, very painful for a devotee. Because a devotee develops love, so it becomes very painful. I used to distribute books, go out, books, shop to shop, love it. Go shop to shop, excuse me, sir, do you work here? Yeah, of course, I do work here. I was showing these to all the shop owners in the area, have a look. It's all about yoga and how, depends, the person, what you say. You show this to all the lovely people, you look like a lovely person. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So, this is the Bhagavad Gita. Anyway, I tell you one thing, if you go to one of these shops and there is an Indian sometimes, and their whole tradition and culture sometimes comes from this impersonal. Oh my God, it's so painful. You talk to an Australian, he doesn't know anything about Krishna. And he's, okay, nah, I'm not interested. Nah. You can, okay, next. But when they come with this whole, God is this and God is that, and, this, everything is God. Everybody is God. And it's all predestined. There's nothing you can do. You just live and, oh my God, it's just, where are you going to start making this person understand and drop his pride? Where do you start? It's like, it's one of the toughest, that's just my point, one of the toughest, like they say in Australian English, toughest gig. When you preach, go to this kind of person who has this philosophical, can be very difficult, very difficult. It's easier to preach, literally, that's my experience, of course, my personal experience, it's easier to preach or to teach a drunkard and say, Krishna is God. Yeah, of course, he's God. Chant Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Easy. At least he makes some spiritual advancement. But when somebody is an impersonalist and he's like firm in his, convictions, it's very, isn't it? Would you agree? Very painful. It's very painful. Anyway. Anything else? Or is that, yes?
Thank you very much for the lovely class, Prabhu. It's an amazing purport, and a thought came to my mind when you were reading that. It's that Prabhupada went into so much elaborate detail about the Satsandarbha. And but at that time, when Prabhupada translated the Caitanya Caritamrita, we didn't have many scholars. We had Pradyumna Prabhu and, maybe one or two others. But yet Prabhupada, even though at that time it would have been hard to conceive how the Satsandarbha could be translated by one of our devotees, that Prabhupada, he emphasised how important it was. And I believe that we do have translations of...
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Prabhupada interrupted his translations of the Bhagavatam to give his disciples this Caitanya Caritamrita in 1974. And I think one of the reasons was he felt the urgency of protecting his disciples. My Guru Maharaj, his name used to be Suchandra, German. He later became Bhakti Bhushan Swami. He told me personally that they went to India in 1970 and they had this pandal, it wasn't organized by the ISKCON devotees, it was a pandal, public pandal, and the devotees would go because they were staying with other, in facilities. And he said they were doing kirtan, and then suddenly these people started all crying and rolling on the floor and all kinds of stuff going on in the kirtan, and crying and shouting, and they told Prabhupada, that have been in 1970, 71, and Prabhupada immediately said, stop it. Immediately said, stop going there. And I think Prabhupada became very concerned about, there's a few classes as well, Prabhupada who talks about Radha Krishna worship in Los Angeles, where he says, he makes the point, if you want to worship Radha Krishna, you have the proper standard. His disciples were going to India, and a few things happened. They were becoming philosophically influenced. The whole incident with the 4 or 5 sannyasis that were expelled of ISKCON at one point was there. And that came from India, right? So I think that's why Prabhupada stopped Bhagavatam, gave us Caitanya Caritamrita, not just for his disciples, but all future generations to come. And very specifically, these are the law books for 10,000 years. So if in 500 years all the things that happened to the Krishna consciousness movement of Lord Chaitanya, what is going to happen within 10,000 years, you can't even imagine. So Prabhupada wanted to make sure possibly that the Krishna consciousness is staying in its philosophical principles for 10,000 years. And thank you. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.